Hear the Gospel of St. John, chapter 21, verses 1 to 14. Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene and to Thomas, and he stood among the disciples. And there were many signs that have not been recorded. After all this, Jesus appeared again to the disciples, this time at the Tiberias Sea, and this is how he did it. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the brothers James and John, and two others, they were together, standing on the seashore. Simon Peter announced to them, "I'm going fishing." "We're going with you," they all replied. So they all went out and got into the boat and pushed off into the water. They threw their nets all night long and yet caught nothing. When the sun came up, Jesus was standing on the beach, but they didn't recognize him. Jesus spoke, "Good morning. Did you catch anything for breakfast?" And they answered, "No." Then he said, "See what happens if you throw the net off the right side of the boat." They did what he said. All of a sudden, there were so many fish in it that the men weren't strong enough to pull the net in. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Master." When Simon Peter realized it was the Master, he threw on some clothes, for he was stripped down for work, and he dove into the sea. The boat was only 100 meters or so off from the beach. The disciples brought the boat in, pulling along the net full of fish. When they got to the shore and climbed out of the boat, they saw a fire laid with fish and bread cooking on it. Jesus said, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." Simon Peter joined them, and they pulled the net to shore, 153 big fish in it. And even with all those fish, it still didn't rip. Jesus said, "Breakfast is ready." Not one of the disciples dared to ask, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Master. Jesus then took the bread and gave it to them. He did the same with the fish. This was now the third time Jesus had showed himself alive to the disciples since being raised from the dead. This is the gospel of Christ.
Praise to Christ, the Word.
Please be seated.
On an Easter morning so long ago, a tomb stood empty. Its great stone rolled away. Encounters, appearances, experiences of all kind began to occur with the followers of Jesus. Whispers of resurrection, stories in a landscape so long ago, stories told by disciples and among those left behind. They were told in all places that Jesus traveled, and to all the people Jesus had encountered. And those people shared this story. It's a story that's been told and retold again and again through the generations. It's a story about light, a light that lived in Jesus. It's a story of call to radical justice. It's a story of compassion and a companion on the way. An extraordinary love that dared to defeat darkness and death. The promise is that the light lives among us. It lives here and now. It lives in me and it lives in you. And the spirit of this incredible creation. It is a light that calls us beloved and beautiful. And as we continue to witness these stories of faith, I invite you to sing along with us.
had been a fisherman all my life until he came around. I never caught much. Between what the emperor collected for the army and what of mine he took in taxes, we'd have a couple to sell and a couple to eat and a belly full of hunger at the end of each week. This guy, he turned my life upside down. My wife wasn't so pleased that I was stirring up crowds, but he had a knack for knowing where the fishes were, and she agreed that someone needed to speak out against the fear-mongering. She soon gathered the other women along the journey. Those were the glory days. Hillside feasts, rousing marches, biting speeches, and people you'd never think of coming out with a common purpose and hope. Heck, for this man, I even walked on water. And then he left. The empire got him. I was so angry, and you know me, I can jump to conclusions. I cut off an ear. I started telling lies. I just didn't know what to do with myself. How could we continue this movement, without a beloved teacher? Our teacher who told us the old stories of prophetic eye-prizing and took them to heart and made them real. I never knew what to do after he left. He called me a rock, but I felt like my belly was the jelly of fish eggs, and all I could try to do was get back to normal. Gather up the guys and go fishing. Maybe then, if we were quiet, the empire wouldn't get us too. At least we could starve with our neighbors instead of hanging on a cross. But that son of a gun, he came back. He reminded us that we do have what it takes to keep this going. He lit a fire on the beach. He lit a fire in my belly. The despair wasn't helping. We needed to remember how we'd started doing things differently. Which side of the boat belonged to living under empire, and which side was ours? Heck, for this man, I'd swim a mile, even just to see him again. I, Simon Peter, find hope in my fire in my belly and the fire we encircle.
Hi, I'm Thomas. When my Lord died, I felt like our boat had gone aground. I thought I'd never see her raise her sail again. At first, I couldn't believe that our Lord had died. I couldn't believe it. How was that possible? I was numb. Nothing touched me. I sure didn't want to go fishing again. And now, I can't believe he's alive. At least, I couldn't until I saw him for myself. I was hurting so bad, and he just took my hand and my heart and saw right through me. His love was so real. It felt like I was touching living flesh. And today, I saw him again on the shore, making us breakfast. I'm sure it was my risen Lord. It reminded me of what the prophet Jeremiah said. I will comfort them and turn their mourning into joy. and their sorrow into gladness. I, Thomas, I find hope in the middle of despair, where I least expect it.
Oh, hello. Hello. I'm Nathaniel's mother. You have to excuse me, I'm really excited right now. The children have just run up from the lake to tell me that the men have caught fish. We're going to be well fed tonight. Oh, you're new, so I really need to tell you that we have been hungry. A better word really is the pain of starvation. It's been so bad for our family, especially because Nathaniel was thrown into prison a month ago. He was just walking too close to the roadside and was thrown up against the wall by a Roman soldier and told he had to pay a fine for nothing. Of course, Nathaniel had no money. He was thrown into jail. And I was so worried about him. But you know, Nathaniel's changed. He's changed over the last year, ever since he came to know this fellow Jesus. No, I have to let you know, Nathaniel was always a good son, a good father, a good husband. But something changed after he spent time with this man. He began to treasure his life. He began to treasure others. He began to treasure his gifts and his weaknesses. Defensiveness left him. He became open to what he calls the Spirit of God. You know, it gave our whole family hope, this change in him. And he would still be in prison today, except that his friends somehow managed to gather a few dried fish and a few coins, and they bribed the captain in the prison, released him. Oh, what joy when he came home. Do you know Jesus? Have you heard about him? Do you know that he was killed by the Romans recently? You know, Nathaniel and all of the followers have been so frightened, afraid they would be next. But it's not kept them from caring for one another and working together. They give each other hope. And you know, the children just told me the strangest thing, that Jesus appeared to them while they were fishing and told them where to fish. Can that be true? Can we dare to hope that Jesus will appear to us throughout our lives? What a wonderful hope that is. Well, I'll soon hear the details of how these fish are caught, and you can come with me. I, Nathaniel's mother, find hope in the abundance of God's presence amidst oppression.
As we continue our journey on the landscape of hope, we remember the light of Christ that leads us. We remember the bread of life that feeds us, and the living water that blesses us, the spirit of joy and celebration that calls us. As we journey together today, I invite us to rise together and sing Called by Earth and Sky on the PowerPoint.